let's talk about planning poker.
Playing poker.
Yeah,
first experience doing it. I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it before as well. It was really interesting. So planning poker is a website
Explain the
game.
concept.
Yeah, like it's a website game where somebody hosts a game and basically you put in, what is it? Like you put in a...
We haven't... Well, you put in each task from a task on a sprint, and then everybody sort of guesses their difficulty in like points, I guess, from 1 to 100.
Yeah, I mean...
Or 0.5 to 100, or whatever the scale is.
I think you can make up
You can make the scale, yeah. And then, the person who's sort of running the planning poker then kind of averages or the most common score or whatever. Someone decides which one to take.
But the thing about it, though, is that it is very fun.
Yeah, in fact...
I had a lot of fun.
We haven't talked about this, but I'm thinking, like, we should count down from 3, and I want both of us to say whether we enjoyed it or not.
Oh, I already said I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I guess that's cheating. I didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
I didn't like it at all.
What? Why?
It seemed like a big fat waste of time.
Alright, so...
Which is why I'm glad you brought it up.
So it did use up a lot of time.
It took probably over an hour.
Though, I will say this. I think it took less time than trying to pick them manually. Trying to estimate manually each task. That took a lot longer before.
The things it does well is it lets everybody know everything that's going on in a sprint. So no one's like, I had no idea this was occurring. So that's good. I don't know what it is I didn't specifically like about it. I mean, I have a few ideas around what it was that I didn't like. By the end you kind of start messing about. That was one thing. So it became less accurate over time, I felt.
I don't know, because there's a sort of an amount of averaging in it, isn't there?
There is, but as time went on, I think people lost patience with it. And I think by the end, everyone was just putting in silly scores.
Yeah, I think, I thought I was, but to be honest, the flaws in it that I see are that there are tasks which are irrelevant to most people.
Right.
There are very few people who know about the task. So unless you're told pretty much what the task is, trying to guess what the complexity of that task is very difficult.
Going to be my next point. Is most of the tasks you either have to explain in great detail so you can give an accurate estimate. But for me, I think the big part of the problem is the fact that we're assigning a tasks at the beginning of a sprint at all. I think we should be deciding on the work and then taking each task one at a time. Because even the people who are in the know may not necessarily be in the know enough to assign a complexity to it. And if they are, it's because it's a result of good planning prior to the sprint. So they probably have a fairly good understanding as to the complexity before anyway. And if they don't, that means there's been inadequate planning. Or it really does, it negates a small amount of group assessment of a task when you yourself who's doing the task doesn't know how complex it is. You hope that the group might give you some idea, but some of the time that doesn't work. Some of the time it does work to some degree, and if everyone can kind of guess anyway, then you could probably have guessed, or an individual who was assigned a task could probably guess anyway.
Actually, now that I think about it, like going back to it and rethinking it again, like what happened, and I thought I was seeing myself overestimating, but it may not be the case, because for the things which I know I was doing, the complexity may be more accurate, or is probably more likely to be more accurate.
So here's the problem: is if you, we did planning beforehand, so everyone had a fairly good idea of their own tasks. You do poker. Everyone says it's lower than what you estimate, and now they drag down your estimation.
And in the end, you're responsible for that.
And you're still responsible for it. And then why did everyone? And then at the end of it, be like, well, why did you estimate so low? Well, you didn't estimate so low. Everybody else did. Yeah.
So you don't know this, but I actually saved the results.
I did.
Yeah, I just printed it to a PDF because it's just on a web page or something.
Sneaky.
Well, no, it's not sneaky. I just wanted to keep them because I was interested in like keeping that result.
I mean, I didn't know. That's why I'm saying sneaky.
So I want to see at the end of this sprint, which
How
is
accurate.
coming up. Yeah, I want to see like which of the things which were marked as low complexity, how much of those are complete. And I think the problem is going to be that probably most of them are going to be complete anyway.
I think my biggest problem with it all is it all relates around what's the point of it, like cost and benefit of this entire thing. And for some people, it's extremely important to be able to predict the sort of workloads and sprints and things like that. However, I find that it's almost impossible to do, especially when you have other holes. I think there's better forms of measurement for prediction. So the idea being is we're supposed to be predicting sprints so that we can see over time, on average, how much work we can complete, right?
It's
irrelevant.
You are onto something because I always am trying to figure out what the value in this is, because I think we talked about it the last podcast actually. I think we sort of have this weird like we're going to end up having this recurring segment which is going to be something about sprints. But last sprint I noticed that I'm always trying to figure out where the benefit is with it, and with complexity specifically trying to figure, because we're trying to figure out complexity rather than time. And I don't think time is I think time is maybe more valuable than the complexity. I'm not sure. Both of them kind of seem equally useless to me, personally, because in the end I don't really know how long my task is going to take, and I also don't really know how complex it is.
So I need to, and the idea being is a business can understand how many resources they have and what it takes to complete a project, and how they can estimate these things over time to on average you'll be able to get this many amount of work done. However, you can still do that by analyzing the work that has been done. So you can look back, and as long as you have characterized that work correctly, estimated times on things that have been done, you can use past data to predict the future rather than current data to then try and predict the future. It's a waste of time.
So, what this is kind of going into is, if you remember, fog bugs, which is it's an excellent bug tracker.
It is.
But very expensive.
It was moderately expensive.
But the benefits of it are that it does
that for you without having to do all
it does all of the tracking. It does predictive deadlines. Right?
It does.
But it also is not very suited to Scrum exactly.
It has now evolved into a better Scrum tool. I've re-looked at it over time. Yeah, they've got better, and they have like swim lanes and stuff like that.
Because Joe Spolsky, that's his name, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Right.
But Joe Spolsky, I follow him on Twitter and his blog. He's a clever guy. He's the one who invented the method that they use.
Prediction.
Yeah.
And so that I can get behind, because it doesn't require any of this bullshit judging of complexity, right?
It's just like you judge you guess a time. Yeah. Pretty much. It's a guess.
Yeah.
And then you get better at guessing.
Right.
And it teaches. Fogbugs is really good at teaching you what you thought was going to happen in whatever time, and then it's like, oh, actually this was going to take like twice the time.
Because it feels like what's really happening is, and this is important because if it feels like this, then this is a problem, right? It may not be necessarily true, but if it feels this way, it's something to be thought about. Is that I have no problem with sprints. Sprints. If it's 8 days, 10 days, whatever, you're determining the amount of work to be done in those 10 days, and everyone sort of decides how much work they can get done, and overall you then try and do the work. But what it feels like is, if you don't get all the work done by the end of the sprint, it's like, but you committed to all this work, like why did you not get it done? When that's not really how sprint's supposed to work. It rolls over to the next one, and then you reassess the backlog. And the real kind of important part of that is, if it didn't get done, then the chances are it may not have been as high a priority as everything else, and you get to reassess the priorities constantly over and over again to make sure, was it really important? And that's really the question, is all the work that's being done in a particular sprint really important? And then that's why you get to reassess constantly, not you missed it,
Yeah, and I guess there's a lot of stuff that's kind of missing from our process at least is the active reevaluation, which is during the sprint. Like should be happening. Like are we on target for the sprint? And
I find it really hard to figure out where everything is.
Jira is not a great tool for this, I've found.
For Jira being one of the most popular tools, especially with for tracking bugs and such, I think it's terrible.
I mean, it's probably a good standalone bug tracker, but to be honest, I don't see it.
I like a lot of Atlassian's products, but I'm really not keen on Jira and Confluence. Confluence, it's a real pain to get about. I still can't find the calendars. I have to go into my recent
Confluence
history.
Seems like a kind of a more confusing kind of wiki.
Yeah, a really confusing wiki. I mean, I can get my way around it and I can make it work. But
it's why I write documentation in the Git repositories rather than in...
It has this really awkward bug that if you add attachments to a case or to a file, well, mostly cases actually, if you add an attachment of like a screenshot or whatever, it has a little section that says attachments. And if you remove one of the attachments and want to replace it with another, so if you have like 3 or 4, then as soon as you remove one, it removes the entire attachment section.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's none. So when you refresh it, it shows you the rest of them.
That's pretty terrible.
And so then I have to add it again, and then it will show the new one. So I have to refresh the page just to add and remove an attachment. The whole section just disappears.
Jira seems like it was small and then it became large without getting rid of features that
seemed
no one
bloated.
I think that's what happens with a lot of like
tons of reports. But also the way it's being used at the moment it hasn't been utilized correctly either. There's lots of underutilized features I think could be better gained from you can track issues with certain modules or whatever, so you can define. At the moment there's thousands of issues in there, none of which is specified to any product, none of which is specified correctly in priority, none which are to any particular component or anything like that. So that's the information I'm saying that helps you predict future workloads. By knowing what you've done before, you can know where you're going to go with it.
Well, and that's the whole thing, isn't it? It's a rolling thing.
It's a rolling thing. So really, hammering down on these complexities during sprint planning is a big waste of time, and also is actually even more of a big waste of time when we're not doing sufficient planning, because you can't assign accurate complexities to some work you haven't planned for.
So I guess what's come up in discussion is a little bit of, internally in our company is when do you make planning part of the previous sprint or of the current sprint? Like, do you make planning a thing at the end to plan the next one? I'm talking about research tasks, because you generally, you're given one day to figure out all the things you need to do for the next sprint, but it's you sometimes need more than that. You need to delve a little deep to find things.
Sprint planning is the one that seems to encompass for a lot of people exactly as it sounds, planning the sprint. But in reality, in a single day, you cannot take all the backlog and work that you need to decide you need to do and understand every single one of the stories and then decide how much you can do in a sprint in a single one-day meeting where you're going to go mad before. No one has the attention span for that. Nobody has the attention span. So and I've seen it before. You start off in the morning, everyone's chipper,
that's all right,
and then by the end of it, you basically yes, let's get this done and over with.
Well, because no one wants to be in an endless meeting.
Well, and that's what happens. So you can't plan, and for very complex work, a story that requires building a system or migrations or data migrations or anything like that. You can't just sit in there and go for half an hour and go, oh well, we figured that task out. It's much more complex than that. So I mean, these are my kind of beasts of sprints in general, and Scrum rather. And there is something to be said for just picking up a task as you go that needs to be done, which is prioritized correctly, and then figuring out how to do it correctly and then doing it. Why not just one at a time plow through each task?
It's kind of like how we used to work was we had a priority list.
And we would reevaluate.
And you just, that's a constant I mean, we didn't really use Scrum in exactly the same way. We used stand-ups. But we didn't need to use the rest of it because we just had this rolling thing because everything needed to be done.
Right.
Nothing was there which didn't have to be done.
When you have a well-groomed backlog, that's true.
And it's like when you have, because no task should ever be useless.
Yeah.
It has to be achieved at some point. So you end up with the rolling, what are they called, priorities.
Yeah.
So the stuff that wasn't high becomes high, and then it gets assigned and done, and you just keep going that way. And that worked really well. We were like churning through things like mega quick. We didn't have very long meetings. We had I think we had one. How long were our sprints? They were about 3 weeks, 2 weeks.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Well,
but we only had an hour meeting.
because when you took on a task you didn't know how to complete, you would then go to the people and figure out what you needed to do to complete this task. And you took as much time as required to do that.
There wasn't a day of stress to try and figure out things.
Everything.
And understand everything.
Yeah. Figure out and understand everything. Whereas, sure, in the sprint, you can then go ahead and you can start talking to people and say, don't understand this, or whatever, or bring it up in daily stand-up or whatever it is to get unstuck. But that's time you didn't estimate for.
Yeah.
If you took on 5 tasks and you didn't realize that 2 of them needed extra information or whatever, then you might not be able to get all 5 of your tasks done. And then at the end of it, it's well, why did you take on 5 tasks?
And in the end, it's not like we live in an age where you can only talk to people at certain times. We're all in the same chat room, so we all talk to each other.
Yeah.
So if someone needs something, they talk to the person they need the thing from, regardless of what they're doing. And so you end up, the stand-ups kind of reduce their use.
Everyone that, from what I can see, modifies the Scrum process to work for them and takes elements that they like.
I don't think anyone takes the vertebim thing and does that.
Maybe to start with they do, but it evolves. It evolves very quickly into what it should be. But if you kind of stay too rigid on it, I think it can do more harm than good. I think it's a starting point, and you figure out what parts really work for a business, because all businesses are different. They have different goals and priorities.
Yeah,
and
different culture as well.
Yeah,
culture's a big portion of it, really.
Right.
Yeah,
it's interesting, but that's gonna, like you said, it's probably a reoccurring theme to hate on Scrum every.
Well, it's not really hate on Scrum. It's just everyone wants to not be in meetings and do as much work as they can.
Well, that's kind of the point of Scrum, actually.
Yeah.
Except we have a lot of meetings, long meetings.
To be honest, our specific company problem is that it's all very. The software isn't. I don't think the software that we're using is very good, and that to me is a roadblock. In the way.
It's not really facilitating it, even though it looks like it's really specifically designed for Scrum.
I don't know.
It does look like it's designed for it. It doesn't work very well.
Well, for instance, in Jira, the swim lanes are kind of hidden. It's hard to get back to them. Once you know where it is, it's easy.
It's good work.
Yeah, it's okay, so where's the swim lane or whatever? Isn't swim lane a generic term? I didn't think that was a specific.
It's a generic term that has been used. As far as I'm aware, it's always been around in business.
That's what they're called, right? So
it's just the term for moving things along.
Yeah, and you have set categories.
Yeah, it's been used prior to Scrum, just for different responsibilities. Will go, you have a sales swim lane.
Trello is a swim lane.
Yeah,
essentially. And that's a really good tool. I use that a lot for random things. Not for anything important. I use it for my shopping list.
It's good for that.
It is, because you have on one side you have your inventory, and the other side you have things you need to get. You just move things into where you need to get them, and that's your shopping list. It's really easy. But anyway, and then you can just keep moving things. But so anyway, the swim lanes is difficult to use.
It is. What I really need to do is really think about alternatives to Scrum in general. I'm always looking. Scrum is fairly widely accepted. It doesn't mean it. That's a good sign.
It's one method.
It's there are some haters out there for Scrum. I'm not saying I'm one of them. But I like Scrum for certain elements of it. It reminds me a little bit of Fabric Area, and their methodology is just prioritization, and everything needs to get done.
Which is
just keep going at it.
Is that really their methodology? Or?
That's even Priestley and a couple of other contributors to that. They just have a big list, and they kind of communicate with the community and what's required. The community kind of acts as the sort of product owners, they have built some similar Scrum features in, like workboards or swim lane.
They have swim lanes.
They do have swim lanes.
Yeah.
But their methodology, as a small team, is they have stuff they need to do, they prioritize it, they let everyone know what that priority list is, and they can comment and help them reprioritize it. But it's a case of this stuff, shit needs to get done, and we're going to do it one at a time, and then they will work on each one.
Because everything needs to get done.
Right, and if it's not there, then it will be closed as invalid or whatever. And sure, that list gets bigger and bigger, but it's an easy way to then, try and get more people involved in that particular project or for a company.
It works
to
well.
Justify more.
It works well
resources.
for an open source thing, because
I think it can work well for anything. Personally.
Yeah,
I think it just says you got 2,000 tasks, you can't close them as fast as you're opening them. You probably need more resources.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets really simple at that point.
Yeah. So we want to go ahead and tackle Vagrant.
Vagrant. Yeah, I like Vagrant.
Vagrant's pretty cool. We use it all the time for everything. I have about 5 Vagrants.
That's a lot, and for those people who don't know what Vagrant is, they may think that's a lot of Vagrants and you have too many, you need to get rid of some.
Well, no, it sounds like I have, people who are not very trustworthy around me. Like five of those, that's a pretty bad number.
That's
of
a lot.
people.
You should probably
There shouldn't be that many Vagrants.
get rid of a few, or get more. So what is Vagrant then?
Alright, so Vagrant...
Give us the gist.
I'll give you the gist of it. So Vagrant is... What is Vagrant? How to easily describe it? It's essentially a virtual machine.
In fact, it uses VirtualBox, is it?
It can use any.
Any, okay.
Well, I wouldn't say any, but it can use VMware, VirtualBox, and I believe there's a specific Windows one it can use.
So here's what it does. It's great for development environments. You can create an image of your production environment. You can then load it up automatically into a new virtual machine on your system that you can easily share with other people. And Vagrant kind of automates this entire process to make sure you can use things like Puppet to...
Yeah, so you can... This is the problem with Vagrant. It's really cool, but there are some problems with it. It's very difficult to get started with unless you know a fair amount of different provisioning software, which is when I talk about provisioning software, it's essentially programming a manifest of software to get installed onto a machine. So something like Chef is probably the most popular one that I've seen.
Chef is very popular.
And Opsworks use it. Amazon use it a lot.
Amazon use it. It's the most popular one. It's the one that's become fairly industry standard.
Yeah, and then there's Puppet, which is also all of them are very commercial, but they're still sort of free to use for solo stuff.
Right.
But Puppet's okay as well. Puppet has its own language, which is kind of frustrating.
So just to back on what Vagrant is and the benefit of Vagrant and why you should consider using Vagrant if you don't already, it's a way to make sure that your production environment, and all the other developers that work on a project, and anyone else you want to share it with has the same environment.
Yeah.
And so if they have the same environment, you're not going to get, I wrote my code for PHP
5 or whatever.
But the production environment doesn't run that, and so it breaks.
Yeah, the production environment's on 5.3 and you're using things which don't exist in this language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then you can, have use it as your development environment. And then that it's going to work on the production environment because they're exactly the same, or
very similar,
or as similar as possible. The aim really is to have it almost as identical.
Pretty much identical. You want at least the same major version of PHP.
And so that's the benefit of using it. And then the second benefit, I guess, is that stuff is pretty hard to do, to make it something packageable and you can send to someone else to automate that. So a new developer you onboard and you want them to have the same development environment, and you hand them over the Vagrant, and they literally
they literally call the command to start Vagrant, and then they have an environment. After a while they have an environment running,
right, and all they know is how to type Vagrant up. And
it's a very simple, at its core, it's a very simple command line
once
program.
It's set up. It's the setting up that's the difficult part that you were talking about.
Yeah, so, I mean, the way you use it is, so you usually commit something called a Vagrant file to the repository where, wherever you want the environment to be, we commit ours to the representative repositories where they are. So we have one for our backend system, one for our front end. So you can launch a front end Vagrant, which will run the front end and a little bit of like extra stuff to make that work.
Right.
But it's the idea of it though is that that's how that works. But then what you do is you don't actually you don't commit the whole virtual machine to the repository because that's ridiculous and too large. You commit a Vagrant file, which is essentially a manifest. And the way Vagrant works is whatever environment you are in, if you call Vagrant up in that directory, it will launch everything that you need to get working.
Right.
No problems. It even works apparently on Windows with the same Vagrant stuff. Like it's not an issue. It worked for us recently with a guy who was running Linux and we're on Mac OS.
Yep.
So it worked perfectly, no problems at all. I think it's more likely to work better on Linux though.
I think so. Yeah, it probably is. Or sort of Unix-based operating systems, probably.
Yeah, everything that Windows really. But they tell me, they say on their website it will work.
Yeah. Well,
I don't always trust that though.
And then one final cool feature, I think, which we probably haven't used enough, but it's pretty useful from time to time, is you can use the Vagrant share feature, where it turns your local machine into a one that can be accessed remotely.
So that's vagrantshare.com, I think. It's still part of the Vagrant project, I think. But it's very much a very cool feature because if you have, if you're doing some, interface testing and you're writing a new feature even, you can share, this works only really well for the web, if it's web stuff. So if you have, a new feature that you're working on and you don't want to commit it or you have some problems or whatever, and you need help from another developer, you can run Vagrant Share, and you'll get a URL back, which is basically piping that thing through the internet to someone. It is all public though. But
it is, but it's a very unique URL. That's
very obfuscated URLs,
and of course, it's only up as long as you want to share it for.
Yeah, as soon as you kill the command.
But you made a good point. This is only if you're making a web application or you're a web application developer of some sort. You can't obviously use this for anything else.
Yeah, I mean, for my backend systems, my backend Vagrant that I have, it obviously is not useful at all. No, because I don't even run a web server, for instance.
I wonder though if you could take that public URL and if it give you any SSH access, because then it would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, it would be probably a bad idea to do that on those URLs. I don't know. I don't know what the security concerns are.
I don't know about security concerns. I'd have to look into that more. But I'm just saying, maybe it allows you to do that, and then someone could test remotely your backend system by getting into the Vagrant and running it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
I don't know if that's true. I'm just. I
think you can do it, but
I'm just thinking. It's a very typical podcast, I think. It's what I imagine a podcast would be. We've got a cup of tea, which in MongoDB mugs.
Well, typical UK.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we should be drinking coffee.
It's a very English thing.
It's we're just chatting over tea,
That's a very English thing.
Yeah, just podcasting over a cup of tea.
Yeah, I'm almost out though.
So what's your biggest problems with Vagrant then? What do you not like about it? I like it just in general, but I'm not the one who makes them, so...
My biggest problem is probably Puppet.
Just because it's something you're not so common. Common knowledge.
It's something that it's okay, I have to learn this because it enables me to do awesome things.
Yeah.
But Puppet is very confusing to work in. It's as confusing as Chef is. Chef is probably a little bit easier to understand just because I have the context of already using it in AWS OpsWorks.
Right.
But it's OpsWorks is awesome, by the way.
Stress this is DevOps stuff, really. This is not usual.
Well, no, because this is the thing with provisioning stuff. It's they always say this, right? In provisioning stuff, they always say it's like the marrying of programming and DevOps. I don't see it like that. I see it as being they've created their own language. I think it's their own language anyway. I've never seen it before, and it's.
Oh, well, they're programmers. They can learn a language.
And then they've got the documentation is very good actually, but it's not it's not an object-oriented language. It hasn't got very good third-party support. If you want to find anything to do with it, it's all of their tutorials on it, which are not complete. I don't know how old Puppet is, but it doesn't seem like there's enough stuff about it, really. But I don't know, it's problems I have with it are probably just to do with provisioning. I mean, Vagrant doesn't really have any provisioning stuff built into it. All Vagrant does is essentially a launcher for virtual machines.
It manages and looks after them, so it knows when to destroy them, when you get rid of them and stuff. And it uses, what was it? The class name is like headless.
The headless virtual machines. Yeah. It depends which one you get. You can put whatever one you want.
Right.
It just has to be a virtual machine.
Overall, I think anyone who has a problem with development environments and doesn't want to tackle it in one of the other ways, which I think people do. I mean, a lot of people use VPN in to different development environments, stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's not. They can be ideal for some setups, but
is that like the Facebook method?
I think Facebook VPN's into somewhere to work.
All of their coders are pretty much command line, aren't they?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but I know it depends on the project. Maybe.
I am not a fan of coding on the command line myself.
No.
I don't like Vim or any of them. It's actually quite good because I can win any argument about Vim versus VI versus Emacs because I can say they're all terrible.
You don't like any of them.
I mean, people can swear by them. I mean, I don't want to start a flame war or anything. I don't actively use them because I like my GUIs.
I think there isn't an argument to be had. I mean, I think the argument is that, if you program all the time and you're a hardcore programmer, then you use these things like you have something to prove. But, if you've got nothing to prove to anyone and you're just happy just being a very good programmer, then having an extra tool that makes your life easier, like a GUI, I think that ends the argument there.
Yeah. I mean, it's PHP Storm. I mean, for one, I'm obviously a PHP developer, so I'm already like the scum of the universe when it comes to the programming community.
Yeah, the language.
I can't get any lower, really, so I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, whilst making awesome applications.
Well, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, not that you can't program other languages, you do many others, but PHP is
primarily PHP at the moment.
Yeah.
Just depends which is popular, really. That's the funny thing, really. It didn't to any people who have I don't know what the word is, prejudice. I don't know.
I think it's close to religious about their programming language.
I guess it is.
There are some which are great, and there are ones which are great for different purposes, and there's ones which are good at lots of things and bad at other things, and PHP is bad at everything but can do them all. So,
I think that in itself means it's good at something.
That does make it mean it's good at something. It's not a bad thing.
You can make command line applications.
You can do anything.
You can make web applications.
You can make SWF
server
files.
Software. You can
make
Flash.
You can make Flash files
if you really want to.
There is a library that allows you just to generate Flash on the fly.
I'm pretty sure it's unsupported now, but
it probably is unsupported now. But when I saw that, I was like, "Whoa, you can do anything." I can make a Flash movie.
PDFs as well.
Yep.
PDFs. Images and graphs. I mean, you can do pretty much everything, but then you can do pretty much everything in any other language, really.
Right, but it's fairly extraordinary.
But anyway, my point is, it's not worth hating on any language. No. They're all terrible in their own way.
They all have their quirks.
Just like operating systems, every operating system sucks.
Yeah, that's true.
Except for OS X.
No, OS X has its quirks too, but it certainly is the lesser of.
Well, that, again, that's just debatable, isn't it? I mean, it's just endless.
Yeah. No point getting into this. I think we should stop the topic.
Yeah, we should.
I feel like, everyone has something to say.
Yeah. All right. Let's stop. Let's talk a bit more about Vagrant. Do we have anything more to say about Vagrant?
I mean, I think it's a tool I recommend for everybody to use, and
yes, especially if you're working in a small-ish team. I think it doesn't work well for a large corporation because you probably have a different method of doing this.
Well, as I said, it gets into maybe you have particular needs at a larger size, but if you're a small development team, I mean, to a reasonable size, I mean, whatever works, whatever your protocols are internally, there comes a point where companies don't want you to take the code home with you, and you have to kind of remote.
Yeah, which I find I have issue with that. I don't like the idea of people not being trusted.
I mean, that's a topic I think for another time. In fact, I'm quite curious to learn more about that. Maybe bring it up on another podcast.
Sure.
Because I don't understand it fully, but I know it's a common issue.
Trust.
Not necessarily. I don't know. That's what I want to research. Is trust the component of this, or is there another reason for it?
All right.
So I'd like to save that for another podcast.
We'll save that. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to something else.
When I see you, one of the first things out of your mouth is probably not hello. It's I'm gonna buy a new keyboard.
That's a recent thing, to be fair. It's not like
every week I go, "How's your weekend?" And you go, "I'm buying a new keyboard." And I'm like, "Oh really? But you just bought a new keyboard."
I have 2 mechanical keyboards in the space of like months, I think.
Probably less than 8 weeks.
I guess it was, yeah. I mean, it's pretty quick.
But
they are addictive. They're really addictive.
But not only that, you have all the switches that, the different types of switches, and then you have you own other keyboards, right? I mean, you have
I have 2 Mac keyboards.
You have 2 Mac keyboards, and then you obviously, for good reason, have a lot of keyboards, and I just wanted to bring that up. That maybe we need a support group.
All right.
This is an intervention.
What
not a
is
podcast.
like Mechanical Keyboards Anonymous?
Yeah,
or something like.
I buy too many keyboards. Anonymous. So this is really just I'm staging an intervention.
Why are these groups always called anonymous, but they always stand up and say their name? I never got that.
I think we have to say that for another podcast.
All right. Okay, so mechanical keyboards. What exactly?
Well,
about them?
Start from the beginning.
All right. So why did I choose to go mechanical?
Yeah, like what was your motivation to buy your first mechanical keyboard? How did this happen?
So, I think the main reason was I started watching a lot of tech reviews, YouTube channels, and they always review keyboards. Huh?
Who in particular? You can link them in the comments.
Probably if I remember, put them in. I'll have to listen to it again.
Linus?
So Linus, yes. I was trying to think of the more, like the one which actually made me, but maybe it was Linus. So Linus Tech Tips, they do a lot of stuff with keyboards, and I think it was Joanne as well. Joanne Tech, I think her channel is called Joanne Tech Lover or something. She reviews a lot of like peripherals and stuff, and she was reviewed a lot of the stuff that Linus does as well, and also Tech Syndicate as well. I mean, it's pretty much all of the like big ones. Those guys, they review a lot of keyboards. Tech Syndicate especially, they love keyboards and headphones and all that stuff. They're really cool people though. But
I take a picture of you.
Oh, well, okay, that's fine.
I saved that for later. Yeah, go on. I just like your setup with all your microphone and stuff, so I need to get a picture of that.
Okay, that's fine.
So
Linus probably more than anyone else.
So you saw a bunch of interviews.
Well, I wanted to know what the whole big deal was.
Reviews,
like, right? I wanted to know why they were good. Like, what the hell was the point? They were recommended for gamers, typists, programmers. And I was like, oh, well, why are they good? Because I've just been using a Mac keyboard forever. And
what are you missing out on?
Yeah, exactly.
So what are you missing out on? What am I missing out on?
Because you're using Mac keyboards.
Yeah.
Well, you know, one thing, I actually want to say what's good about Mac keyboards first, because Mac keyboards are awesome. I love Mac keyboards still. And I love typing on them.
So outside of mechanical keyboards, you still think Mac keyboards are good?
Yeah, and they're they're not mechanical exactly, but they are a type of keyboard which is fine. They're rubber dome keyboards with like, they have, I don't know what it's called, but like, where you have a space bar and it's got like that metal thing in it. It's like a latch mechanism.
As a layman who knows nothing about keyboards, I describe them as just non-shit chiclet keyboards like you have on a laptop, which are terrible.
Yeah. That's the Mac keyboard, basically.
That's the Mac keyboard. Obviously not on a Mac laptop, they have the same ones, which are basically like full-size keyboards, the ones that you buy from them. But talking about most Windows laptops or whatever, or anything else, they have these really flat keys, which are close together.
Very close, usually.
Very close together, and I just don't like the feedback from them. And they make like it's kind of a light clacky noise, but like a clicky. I don't really know what it is. It's a weird noise.
They don't feel good.
They don't feel good to type, and I hit random keys because they're so close together.
Whereas the cool thing with like the Mac keyboards is that they are the same keyboard on the laptop as you get as a full keyboard as well.
Right.
Which means there's no difference in use.
Right. So you can go back and forth between a...
Yeah, and they're the same design as
Yeah,
well.
same design. I think it's great. They have the same design as a laptop as they do.
So it means there's no learning curve between
No, you can go back and forth between them if you
I
need to
mean,
use
that's
them.
not a problem for me though. But it's useful.
For someone who, say, uses a Windows computer frequently but hooks up to a large monitor that has a keyboard and mouse separate from it,
You know,
who goes back and forth between them, I could see that being pretty annoying until you get used to both of them.
You know, it's the best. I think the people who are going to have the most benefit with that are people who only use the small keyboard, because I use a full-size keyboard when I don't use my Mac keyboard, and I always miss my numpad all the time. I'm like, where is my numpad? I have hotkeys hooked up to that. They don't work. But anyway, so Mac keyboards, I love them. They're really cool, but they break.
I like them, and I do agree they break.
Like,
Few issues, broken keys occasionally.
Yeah, because they're just essentially like a laptop key.
Yep.
They are if you break one off, if you travel especially as well, like they can catch on things and break off.
Yep.
And they have a high failure rate when they do that. Whereas mechanical keyboards you generally don't travel with. So I don't know if they're more or less.
They seem like they'd be pretty hardy, to be honest.
Yeah, what I've got here is pretty tough.
So yeah, I mean the Mac ones, full-size one, they're also pretty heavy, to be honest. They are quite heavy, right? The full-size one. I mean, even the small one I think is heavy for its size.
Yeah, it's because they're full-size, really. But if you really think about it, the full-size Mac keyboard, the one which has the numpad and everything, that's pretty heavy. I mean, it's essentially a solid piece
block of aluminium or whatever
Yeah.
it is, or whatever alloy they're using these days. From
I think it's aluminium.
Maybe it's adamantium. Can't be rude.
No, it's not that strong.
No, but the point being is they're pretty heavy, but I don't think it's a bad trait. I think it's a mixed trait. If you want to travel with a Mac keyboard, it's quite heavy.
You know, the weight is good because it keeps it on the desk.
Right, so it's good to type on. So I think it's but when I think about like plastic keyboards that you could just buy, like a Logitech one or whatever, they are pretty light and flimsy.
It's because they, what's interesting about, especially the one I have here, the keyboard I have here is the Code keyboard.
Right.
Made by WASD in association with Jeff Atwood, who a lot of people probably know. Apparently, anyway. He apparently helped design it. But it has a solid steel backplate in it. So it's really heavy.
Really heavy, yeah.
And it's definitely not going to move. I've got it here, so it's like, it's not moving.
Which is important when you're typing.
Yeah, but also it's, the Mac keyboard is solid aluminum or aluminium.
It is.
Whatever. It's, and that's quite heavy as well.
It's quite heavy.
It's obviously, the thing, so I like the Mac keyboard. That's what I'm saying. It's fine. But the only reason I switched to mechanicals was to figure out what the big deal was about them. And
so what's the big deal?
So the thing is with mechanical keyboards, it's very hard to get into because you start to research it and you're like, okay, now everyone starts saying that I need to figure out what kind of switch I want. And generally when you're starting out, there's 5 choices and they're called Cherry MX. They're the type of switches. That's the sort of thing that people recommend to get into.
What's the MX, do you know?
I don't know what it stands for, but I just know it's a brand, really.
Okay, so Cherry MX, a particular company that makes switches.
They're a company, yeah. And they make switches. They make a variety of switches. They're color-coded, so you have browns, reds, greens, and they all have a different kind of feeling to them. I'm using clears, which are, it's really hard to talk about because it's a feeling. This is the problem with mechanical keyboards. They feel different. It's very hard to buy something that feels different. So they have a different actuation point and pressure. So the clears are quite heavy to press, but they have a clear point of actuation, like at the point at which you will actually type something.
Right.
So they're very accurate. You can be very clear very deliberate about your typing, which is very important, I think, when it comes to programming.
Because the typo can break a program, obviously.
Yeah, it's much more important when it comes to programming than anything else, I think. But whereas with the Mac keyboards, I would actually find I would make errors thinking back. like with accidentally hitting keys, because the actuation point on those is very high. Like you can sort of be resting on a key and accidentally press it. Like, because I'm kind of lazy with my hands on my keyboard, and I'll just let them lay on there, and they would have a light actuation force, and I would actually like hit keys accidentally just from letting my hands rest.
Right.
Which is not great. But that wasn't a huge problem. Not, it's definitely not a deal breaker, because that's just my own fault. But I found this mechanical keyboard that I'm using now is very accurate.
For those of you watching in black and white, he's describing a black keyboard with white lights.
Yeah, the problem with keyboards, the problem with mechanical keyboards as well, actually, I think you mentioned this, is that they just look terrible.
They look like something from the early 1980s. Maybe 1979.
Because they're big and chunky, and they're just
very plain.
They look like, they're plain. They look like just a keyboard.
Yeah.
And you're like, you spent $160 on that?
I mean, it's a lot of money to spend. I mean, I really don't judge the amount you spend. I know there's a lot more work that goes into those keyboards than any other keyboard. But they do look remarkably plain for something that costs a lot. And obviously that just, clearly the consumer demand for a mechanical keyboard doesn't care what it really looks like. It's not like it has smooth... They care about the keys specifically. That's the only thing they care about. Seemingly, that's what I'm guessing.
There's a great deal of effort going into making keyboards that are customizable.
It doesn't have like particularly rounded corners. It
just looks like a keyboard, like a crappy keyboard you buy like for $10 or whatever.
You would look at that and you would have no idea of its value.
Yeah, which is kind of good, because no one's going to steal it.
Well, if that's something that keeps you awake at night.
Well, yeah,
someone might steal my keyboard.
Yeah, well, if you travel a lot, I suppose it's a problem.
And take your keyboard with you,
Yeah, I guess that is a bit of a niche thing. That not many
I don't think
anyone's
anyone's going to steal your keyboard. I mean, it's great, but I don't think anyone's going to be out to get you. I mean,
they'd probably
if
be
they
more
knew
likely
the
to
value,
steal my PC.
Right. I mean, if someone... I mean, obviously, is a great deal of value. I mean, it costs a lot, and the Switches cost a lot. And so it's a valuable keyboard. But what I mean is it doesn't reflect that. It doesn't... it's not like your mouse, for example, is like a gaming mouse. So what mouse do you have?
I have I think it's Cyborg Rat 7.
Right, and things like a work of art. It's like crazy modular thing. It has a cool design. And
this thing hasn't aged well, because I picked no one ever picked the white version of mice, because they get the oil from your hands really deteriorates them, and it changes the color. Mine's just sort of going sort of yellow.
Grey. Oh, yellow.
Yeah.
Anyway, but the point being is, obviously, it's a cool looking mouse, right? It looks fairly unconventional. It's still a mouse, obviously.
Well, mine is even more unconventional, because I use it like no one else does.
You take it off parts from.
I take off parts. Yeah.
But the point being, right, it is a very expensive mouse probably, and it has a cool design to it.
Yeah.
Whereas your keyboard looks like something from 1979. And it's still,
but this is one keyboard that I have, right? So you were talking about me having multiple keyboards.
Right, yes, because that's, like I said, you come in and, how was your weekend? You're like, I'm buying a new mechanical keyboard.
Yeah, because, I found out on WASD that you can, on WASD.com, or WASD, or WASD.com, I don't know I always say WASD, but the pronunciation isn't important, that's the website. And you can customize which color your keys are, which is really cool, and I love the idea of doing that. So I bought.
I do too. I like the clarity between the.
It essentially looks the same as the keyboard I have here, but it's the
black one. He's talking about the black one.
Yeah, it's just
no one knows what keyboard you have here.
Well, they have but if you go to whatever, look at the code keyboard on WASD.com.
Yeah.
And you will know what this keyboard looks like. They all look the same.
Yeah.
There's no difference. You can't customize the code. That's the thing.
Right. It's just black.
It's because it's got backlighting, and you can't get customized.
I like the backlighting. You don't get that on the other keyboards.
No, I actually don't like the backlighting anymore. Specifically, it's good for gaming, but it's not good for like regular stuff.
Because I like backlights.
It's harsh on your eyes, to be honest.
I turn it down to the lowest brightness.
It's on this thing. If any complaint I have about this keyboard specifically is that the brightness doesn't go down enough. So it's too bright. This is on its lowest setting. This is as low as it goes. But anyway, no one else can see that. So
it's bright. It's bright. I concur. It's bright.
If I was to put it on its like maximum.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you see what I mean? It's like a damn lighthouse.
I'm looking at this keyboard right now, and I'm pretty sure I'm blind in both of my eyes.
Yeah. So anyway, you probably heard what it sounds like as well, which is cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's So anyway, the one I have now is another WOSD keyboard, but it's their basic one. It's the 108 key or whatever, full size ISO Western ISO keyboard. So it has the weird like non-UK enter key. It's cool though. I don't like that, but it's customized. I have different colors, and it's very subjective because obviously it's customizable. It's going to be what I want, not what anyone else wants.
Right.
So I have different areas color coded. I have like my modifier keys coded differently, colored differently, and to me it's great. But that keyboard feels a lot different than this one, even though it uses the same switches, and that's in part due to what the keys are made of, and So the attraction of what is the attraction, I suppose, of mechanical keyboards? It's the switches.
Right.
It's how it feels, not really how it looks. It doesn't really matter, even if I customized it.
Tactile feedback from
pressing an actual physical switch. Each switch, I think that each switch costs about $1, so you can easily see where the cost comes from.
Whereas traditional keyboards or most other keyboards, apart from mechanical keyboards, this is my limited understanding. You're pressing it down and it's hitting a circuit, which then tells the computer that the key is there.
I mean, you're still hitting a circuit, but it's different, right? So what rubber dome ones, it's the Mac ones. Mac ones are the same as any other keyboard. They use, well, from what I understand of them, what they look like they use. I don't know what the technology is. I'm not that good at this stuff, but it's they use rubber domes like switches, which I think they're capacitive switches. So when you push down on them, a little capacitive or conductive thing hits a circuit and does that. That's what does the actual key press, right? The problem with rubber domes is they can wear out pretty easily.
Yeah.
And it really depends on what kind of force you hit them with. And a lot of people are very aggressive typers. And especially the E key. The E key is going to be the one that wears out the first.
Right.
I never had a key wear out, to be honest. I think that technology is pretty good.
My small Mac keyboard that's 6 years old or so is well and truly worn out. I mean, the keys the keys on this one sometimes fail.
Really?
I mean, they just don't.
Yeah, because it's wearing out that little capacitive pad the conductive pad that hits the keyboard. The thing with mechanical switches, especially the clears, Cherry MX clears, is that when you activate the key, the switch, it doesn't hit anything. It doesn't contact anything. It's a little switch that's like being actuated inside. So the idea is mechanical keyboards last a lot longer. They apparently have a huge amount of lifetime. Each switch has, I think it's upwards of 1 million, or no, like more than that, key presses.
Huge number of key presses.
It is a huge amount of key presses. I don't know what the average number of key presses one person can do in a day, but it's a lot. Basically, so your E key is going to last forever. Even if you
hit one key 1,000 times in one day, that'd still be a long time.
Yeah, if you need to hit 1 million key presses before it fails, then that's a lot. So the reliability is one thing as well. So the only reason I want another keyboard is because I want exactly the same customized one that I already have at work, at home, without having to travel. That's the only reason I want another one.
Right.
But it isn't another $160.
It is,
which is a lot of money, but it is customized and it's all great, and they have great customer service and stuff. So great company, really.
No, I think it's cool. I get it. I think I'm still going to stick to my.
Would you not want to try one?
I'd like to try one, but I don't want to buy one to try one.
You could borrow one of mine actually when I get the new one.
If I borrow one of yours, sure, I'd give it a try.
Yeah, why not? I mean, I'm not going to need one.
Yeah, I think it's curious. I do think you have purchased a lot of mechanical keyboards, and if you buy a third one, I'm wondering when the fourth will come. But I think they're cool. I get it. I mean, when you're on something all day long, your input devices are extremely important. I think that's really what it boils down to.
Yes.
What you sit at, your desk, your chair, your mouse, your keyboard. If you do a lot on a computer.
Yeah.
That's really something that I don't think a lot of enthusiasts or people who do this all day
You gotta
long.
look after yourself, basically.
You do, and that's things like posture and even keyboards. I mean, and also one thing that people don't do, including myself, is keep keyboards clean enough as well.
So that's a good thing about these keyboards, by the way, is that they, at least the WASD ones, they come with a keyboard cap puller.
Right.
So, and it's designed for this. So you can pull the keycaps off and clean it and keep it clean.
Because not that I want to get into it too much, no one wants to hear it, but keyboards are dirty places.
Especially if you use them all the time.
Yeah.
And especially if you eat at your desk.
Yeah.
Which I do all the time. Both my desks.
So they're definitely covered in bacteria.
Oh, yeah. But actually, I think the WASD keyboards come with antibacterial
right,
coating.
which is more and more common these days.
Which is why you don't use Windex to clean your keyboards ever.
Right.
Windex will erode it completely. You have to use just like soapy water or something.
So you
keyboards.
You heard it here. Don't use Windex on your keyboards.
Not on these ones anyway, because it ruins that coating that protects them.
And I know more and more laptop keyboards are having this antibacterial coating and stuff like that.
Well, the Mac ones definitely do, especially the laptop keyboards. Although mine is absolutely worn out.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lifespan on these.
Talking about actually cleaning keyboards, Mac ones are impossible to clean.
You kind of need to just have a very...
Doing any kind of maintenance on a Mac product is like doing brain surgery.
You gotta carefully clean it.
Yeah, like I remember having to install RAM into my old, what was it?
Mac Mini?
Mac Mini, yeah. You have to use a paint spreader to even get into the case. And then all of the little wires that you have to remember where they're supposed to go. And
crazy. Open heart surgery on your Mac Mini.
It's fun, but it's harrowing when you're working on something that costs so much.
Yeah. Huh.
Alright, so that's mechanical keyboards, I think.
Yep. I concur.